So tell me about the last time you had sex, laying bare and learning to repair our love lives. This book was written by Ian Kerner and was published by Grand Central Publishing in 2021. The 4-book summary of this book will help you enjoy a more fulfilling relationship and sex life. You will also learn to recognize the difference between reactive and spontaneous desire, as well as how not to feel embarrassed by your sexual fantasies. As well as broadening your horizons about all things kink, you will also discover the key components to a healthy and happy sex life. Before we delve into the article, let's find out a bit about the author. Ian Kerner is a psychotherapist and sexologist who works with individuals and couples to help them with relationship issues. He is often cited as an expert in various media outlets, including The Atlantic, The New York Times, and The Economist, and is a contributor on CNN Health. He has lectured for the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium, the Ackerman Institute, Tony Robbins, Goop, and TED 2021. Kerner is the New York Times best-selling author of She Comes First, which has been translated into more than 10 languages. As well as being a clinical fellow of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, AAMFT, he is certified by the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors and Therapists, and is a member of the American Family Therapy Academy, AFTA. And now for the book summary, starting with the first key concept. Every sexual event is a sex script that can be deconstructed and reconstructed to make sex more fulfilling. Every sexual event is a sexual script that tells a story, is full of clues, and leaves its own unique imprint. When a sexual script is successful, the participants will be completely absorbed in the moment, and sex becomes a familiar dance whose choreography comes naturally to them. When the script fails, however, we struggle to stay present and find ourselves getting hung up on every minor detail. Let's imagine a house with a basement. The ground floor is where we spend most of our time and where we deal with most of the troubles and woes that life throws at us. The basement symbolizes our emotional basement, where our primary emotions, vulnerability, trauma, and painful memories are stored. In a relationship, building a staircase that leads down to the basement is very important, as is being able to take your partner downstairs and show them what is there. Whether or not we feel seen, heard, and validated in the basement will affect the way we communicate with one another on the main floor. Taking your partner to your basement requires a certain degree of emotional maturity. Taking apart and analyzing a person's sexual script can help locate the hidden pain in their basement, and putting it back together again can help heal the wounds. Sexual desires can be spontaneous, innate, or responsive, and they are all normal. At the beginning of every sexual script, there is desire. Some people always tend to take the lead during sex. For them, a sexual signal turns quickly into excitement and will create a strong feeling of desire. This type of overt desire is called spontaneous desire or highly reactive desire. The general pattern for this type of desire is quite straightforward. Desire leads to arousal, which leads to orgasm and resolution. Not everyone experiences spontaneous or highly reactive desire. Rather than experiencing an instant rush, some people require multiple signals to become aroused. With this type of desire, known as responsive, sexual signals do not automatically attract their attention. They have to deliberately focus on them. This means that people whose desire is responsive typically need something that people who experience spontaneous desire don't need: a reason to have sex. Although in our culture spontaneous desire is widely considered the norm, it is not what all people experience. Many people whose desire is responsive might feel as though there is something wrong with them and could be criticized by their partners for not initiating sex. However, scientific studies have shown that both types of desire are healthy and normal, and neither is better than the other. Researchers Eric Jansen and John Bancroft of the Kinsey Institute, Indiana, developed the dual control model of sexual response, which reflects the idea that sexual response in individuals is the product of a balance between excitatory and inhibitory processes. The researchers liken it to the pedals in a car, alternating between an accelerator pedal, excitation or SES, and a brake pedal, inhibition or SIS. And everyone engages one or both pedals to a different degree in any given sexual situation, depending on their unique sexual physiology, history, and personality. In a reactive desire framework, for example, arousal precedes desire and requires a sex-oriented environment with many positive sexual cues and few sexual inhibitors. A recreational relational template of sexual expression is an essential part of a fulfilling relationship. When it comes to sex, we can consider 3 general categories: procreative, relational, and recreational. The relational view of sex refers to intimacy, affection, and emotional closeness, while the recreational one is about fun and play. Many couples in long-term relationships no longer have recreational sex, and some have never had it at all. Yet, beyond procreation, both relational and recreational sex are crucial to a healthy sexual script, and this is especially the case for couples in long-term relationships. The ideal template for sexual expression is therefore both recreational and relational. More specifically, there are 2 powerful pathways to creating arousal, the physical and the psychogenic, and if you are only using one of these channels, you are only using 50% of your arousal potential. Psychogenic arousal might involve activities such as sharing an erotic fantasy, playing out a sex scenario, or engaging in sexual power dynamics. Side-by-side psychogenic stimulation involves activities like reading some erotic content aloud, listening to an erotic podcast, or watching something sexy together. Combining the physical and psychogenic methods can make a real difference to your sex life. Sexual fantasies are our allies, not our enemies, and they should be enjoyed rather than analyzed. Fantasizing and going beneath the surface of sexual scripts is an essential part of recreational sex. There are 7 main types of sexual fantasies. 1. Sex with multiple partners, threesomes, group sex, orgies. 2. Power, control, and rough sex, BDSM, bondage, discipline, domination, submission, sadism, masochism. 3. Novelty, adventure, and variety, from new sex positions or sexual behaviors. 4. Taboo and forbidden sex, fetishes, voyeurism, exhibitionism. 5. Sharing partners and non-monogamous relationships. 6. Passion and romance, feeling intensely wanted, epic passionate love, sex with an ex. 7. Erotic flexibility, especially homoeroticism and gender bias, sexual fluidity, bisexuality, sex with someone who is transsexual or genderqueer. The erotic formula behind many fantasies is attraction plus obstacles equals excitement. The obstacles are what add the element of taboo that makes things more exciting. Psychoanalyst Robert Stoller calls sexual fantasy a vehicle of hope, a healer of trauma, a protector from reality, a dissimulator of truth. A fixer of identity, a restorer of tranquility, an enemy of fear and sadness, and a purifier of the soul. This is why our fantasies are our allies and not our enemies. An unusual fantasy must be talked through and treated with respect and curiosity. It needs to be acknowledged in a spirit of integration, not amputation. Fantasies are your way into your story, your deep-seated erotic turn-ons, and what gets you going sexually. Once you identify a basic erotic fantasy that you can share with a partner, what you decide to do with it is entirely up to you. Remember, most of the time there is no need to analyze a fantasy, it should just be enjoyed. Kink is an umbrella term that includes all forms of sexual expression considered as outside the mainstream and requires you to be playful and get lost in a scene. Kink is a term used to refer to any kind of sexual behavior enjoyed beyond the mainstream. It includes BDSM, a mix of pleasure and pain, power play, using inanimate objects for pleasure, erotic role-playing, fetishism, consensual non-monogamy or polyamory, variable gender expression, and more. These are all different forms of play. In fact, play is a key part of exploration when it comes to kink, which requires the ability to immerse yourself in some kind of imaginary scenario. This might be a sexy story or an enactment of some kind that generally has an agreed beginning, middle, and end. Before the term became part of our everyday language, these behaviors were often referred to as paraphilias, from the Greek para, next to, plus to love, and were considered perversions or sexual deviations. This ancient way of thinking is the reason why many people ignore the more creative and curious parts of their sexuality, creating an invisible wall of shame between the sex people really have and the type of sex they would like to have. It was only in 2013, with the publication of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, known as DSM-5, that the highly influential American Psychiatric Association recognized that the majority of people with atypical sexual interests do not have a mental disorder, and made a distinction between eccentric behavior and a disordered version of that behavior, paraphilic disorder. Some people enjoy kink from time to time, and for others it is a normal part of their sex life. For some, it may be a part of their identity that goes beyond the bedroom, as in a relationship structured around the exchange of authority, and for others it may be as prevalent as an actual sexual orientation. The orgasm is a journey, not a destination, and it differs depending on the person and the situation. Many people get so wrapped up in the idea of getting down to business that they lose sight of the many possibilities and pleasures that do not involve penetrative intercourse. However, studies have shown that the more diverse the behaviors during a sexual event, the more likely both men and women are likely to reach orgasm. So potentially, the greater the variety of behaviors in a sexual script, the better. Focusing on activities that do not involve penetration requires cycles of giving and receiving known as asynchronicity, rather than trying to give and receive at the same time. Furthermore, orgasms cannot and do not have to be the same for every person or sexual experience to be considered complete and satisfying. What is certain, however, is that orgasm triggers the release of a cascade of substances such as natural pain relievers, stress relievers, and mood enhancers. And that a consistent lack of orgasms typically means that sex isn't working on one or more levels, which leads to a loss of interest in sex within the relationship and a feeling of sexual incompatibility, resentment, and loss of vitality. What happens after sex is as important as the sex itself, and between encounters it is equally as important to maintain an erotic buzz that keeps a couple connected. The post-sex phase is important. For some, after sex there is a return from the transcendent to the body, to the bed, to oneself, whereas others haven't managed to leave the heaviness of their thoughts. Some people want to connect with the person next to them, while others want to fall asleep, and others are ready for the next distraction. Some feel alive and connected, part of the universe, while others feel alone and isolated. If you struggle to be present, try a body scan, a focused attention practice that is at the heart of mindfulness cultivation. Ask yourself where you are emotionally. What do you hear? A body scan can help you make the connection between physical sensations and emotions, connecting these experiences to thought and language, and returning from ruminating thoughts to the here and now. Stay present. In the post-sex stage, you can really integrate sex and love and let the two come together. Love is actually a habit that is formed from sexual desire when the desire is satisfied. At this point, it is crucial to create an erotic thread between sexual events. It is about maintaining moments of erotic connectedness in daily life that allow a couple's sexual selves to be present and seen until they come full circle with a new call to sexual action. In its most basic form, a sex script can be reduced to a combination of physical behaviors, but when sex scripts actually work, their beauty comes not just from the orderly arrangement of the parts, but from the explosive experience they produce, one in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Peggy Kleinplatz, who has led the Optimal Sexual Experiences research team at the University of Ottawa for more than 15 years, has outlined 8 key components to having great sex throughout your life. 1. Complete presence and absorption in the moment. 2. Connect, sync, merge with your partners in and out of bed. 3. Deep sexual and erotic intimacy, which includes caring, mutual respect, and trust in the partner. 4. Amazing communication and deep empathy. 5. Authenticity and transparency. 6. Vulnerability, emotional exposure. 7. Shared exploration, overcoming personal boundaries and having fun. 8. Transcendence and transformation given by a combination of elevated mental, emotional, physical, relational, and spiritual states. This concludes our summary of Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. If you'd like to explore any of the topics covered in this article, why not read the book? Now let's hear a few key quotes from the book. Every sexual event tells a story and leaves its own unique fingerprint, an impression of what happened and what didn't happen, what was said or left unsaid, of pleasure taken and pleasure neglected. Sex involves paradox. We often want the familiar and the distant, the predictable and the unpredictable, the relational and the recreational, all at once. Let me say that again with emphasis. Our fantasies are our allies, not our enemies. Remember, most of the time a fantasy doesn't need to be analyzed, it just needs to be enjoyed. When sex scripts work, their beauty comes from more than just the orderly arrangement of parts, but the experience of magnitude they produce, one in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And finally, let's round off by taking a last look at the main take-home messages from our 4 books analysis. Every sexual event forms a sexual script. When the sexual script works, you get completely lost in the moment. Sex becomes a familiar dance, and nobody has to worry about the choreography. When the script fails, however, you struggle to stay present and your mind tends to wander. Every sexual script can be deconstructed and reconstructed to make sex more enjoyable. Some people experience spontaneous or innate desire, while others experience responsive desire, and both are completely normal and healthy. A recreational, relational model of sexual expression is essential for a fulfilling life as a couple. Sexual fantasies are our allies, not our enemies, and invariably a fantasy should be enjoyed rather than analyzed. Kink is an umbrella term that includes any type of sexual expression beyond that considered mainstream and involves the ability to play and immerse yourself in a scene. Orgasm is a journey, not a destination. It is different for everyone and can change depending on the situation. What happens after sex is just as important as sex itself, and between one sexual encounter and another, it is important to maintain an erotic thread that connects a couple until the time comes for their next sex encounter.